Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our ADEA Technology Brave New World, hashtag We Are Not Waiting, symposium. So our plan for the day is we have 3 speakers who will each address different aspects of the do-it-yourself insulin hybrid pump movement. We will then have the launch of the Diabetes Australia position statement on do-it-yourself APS, and we plan to leave lots of time at the end for a discussion panel because we think there's going to be lots of questions. So rather than questions at the end of each presentation, please save them up to the very end, and then we'll do our best to answer all your questions. Also, throughout the session, both David and Renza will be, what do you say, twittering something. They'll be social mediaing the event. So it's not that they are stuck to their phone and can't look up, it's that they're actually sharing what's happening with the rest of the world that can't be here. So, if you're ready, Renza, without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker, Renza Shibilia. Renza works for Diabetes Australia. She is also a person who lives with type 1 diabetes. Apart from needing insulin to sustain life, Renza also needs coffee, I might add, but we don't actually have a continuous infusion for that. But she is a fierce advocate for people who live with type 1 diabetes. So without further ado, I'll ask Renza to hop up and share her experiences of looping. Now I think you just have to press return. Social media.
David can take that on. Waiting for the day where we do have a pump that does infuse both insulin and caffeine, and that will be a true advancement in diabetes and life technology. So hello everybody, and I'm so pleased to see a full room here to talk about the brave new world of diabetes technology, and in particular DIY diabetes technology solutions. Please come in, there's lots of room at the front so you can heckle us. So I've been using Loop for a year, and I'm going to talk about that. Now, I'm not actually going into all that much detail about the technological side, but what it actually is. So please, we're sort of going to get there in the next presentation from David. So if there's any terminology that isn't really 100% clear, David will explain all of that. Do note down any questions because we really do want to have a very robust discussion at the end. And one of the reasons that we've left so much room for that conversation is because we've all given talks about this, and then we've sort of been whisked off stage, and there are people sitting in the room looking absolutely flabbergasted and wanting to ask questions. So you'll have lots of time to do that today. So I just need to, I say this, but I would like you to read it as well. So I'm going to read it actually. So I'm speaking about my own personal experience and my own personal decision to start using a do-it-yourself artificial pancreas system. This is highly experimental technology and it is not approved therapy. I'm not recommending this therapy at all, or this technology, and Diabetes Australia as my employer is not recommending this technology either. But having said that, we are very much at Diabetes Australia aware that this is happening, and not talking about it is actually incredibly ridiculous, because just because we don't talk about it doesn't mean that it's going to go away. Now, when I'm not talking about Loop, I'm talking about diabetes and language. And one of the words or phrases that we really don't like to use is the term non-compliant. When I first spoke about Loop last year at the ADC Symposium, for most of the people in the room, it was the first time they'd actually ever heard of this technology. And it's fair to say that a number of people in there were, I guess, pretty horrified at what was going on. And afterwards, I needed to have a bit of a debrief because it was, there was a lot of discussion afterwards. And somebody said to me, and it was Tim Skinner, who's a health psychologist, and he said to me, you know what the problem is? You've gone from just being a non-compliant diabetic to a deliberately non-compliant diabetic. And I will point out he did have a very big twinkle in his eye because he knows my position on using words like that. And he was also involved in the writing of the Diabetes Australia language position statement 7 years ago. So he was being very tongue-in-cheek. But, and I asked him to explain what he meant, and he said, well, in the past, you've just been doing what you've wanted to do with your diabetes, you've been non-compliant. Now you're deliberately going and finding diabetes technologies to augment and change around to manage your diabetes. Now it's deliberate. And I'm kind of wearing it as a badge of honour. That's my phone, and that's my phone case, and I actually have it as a t-shirt as well. So I'm going to just start by talking about, so my relationship with diabetes technology has always been very much love-hate. So I love the technology. I'm always an early adopter of the new technology. I'm always really excited to hear what's coming. I'm absolutely thrilled that the T-Slim pump is being launched today. There are some beautiful little devices being launched. There was a new blood glucose meter that was launched yesterday that's beautiful and small and looks great. I always want to be using the latest in technology, but as much as I love it, I hate it. Because there is always something that isn't great about it. And one of the things about diabetes technology is that we are promised that here you go, we are handing you this, and this is going to reduce your burden of diabetes. This is going to make it easier for you. This is going to make it less stress for you. This is going to make it less work for you. And I can tell you that 17 and a half years ago when I started on an insulin pump, that's what I was told. And that actually wasn't the reality. The reality was that I was checking my glucose levels more frequently, that I was needing to focus on slight changes and all these other sorts of things, and it actually wasn't necessarily all that much less work. And then when I went onto a CGM, it was the same thing. I was told this is going to revolutionise everything for you, but oh my goodness, the data flow was just overwhelming. There were alarms beeping at me constantly. It was incredibly, just this constant stream of data I did find very, very overwhelming. I loved it though. I absolutely loved it, but it hadn't necessarily reduced the burden. So one of the things that I love using this slide, so this is a tweet that I sent at an advocate event last year, the Medtronic ran, and it was the wonderful David O'Neill, and he said that the tools we're providing people with diabetes with to replace a functioning pancreas are not up to the task. It's not about the person with diabetes failing. And yet, that is how we feel, because when the technology stops working the way it's meant to, or isn't working the way that it says that it will on the box, well, obviously it's our fault. When in actual fact, these devices, they're just not perfect. They're wonderful, but they're not perfect. And they don't necessarily take away all the work. So I kind of really love that, because I thought we're acknowledging now that it is not the fault of the person with diabetes, that these technologies and the tools that we have that create that love-hate relationship for me, they're not perfect and they're not ideal. So I went looking for the tools because I believed that there was definitely something better out there, and I found them. And I found them in a world that uses the hashtag "We're Not Waiting." So can I just do just a little show of hands if you're comfortable doing this? Who knows about when I say looping or DIY APS or Open APS or Android APS? Does this make sense to anyone? Raise your hand. Put your hand down if you're actually doing it. Okay. If I say Night Scout, who understands Night Scout? Okay, put your hands down. How many people in this room work with children with diabetes? Okay, right. So Night Scout's been around for a number of years now. It was created by parents of kids with diabetes who wanted to be able to monitor their children's data, CGM data, when their kids went around. So they were getting these massive streams of information, but their kid goes off to school for 6 hours a day, and they were unable to keep track of what was going on, and their kids could have been hypo for a number of hours or high for a number of hours, and nothing was being done about it. So Night Scout created a way to do that. Dave's going to be able to talk about the technical side of these sorts of things later on. So Night Scout was just one of the options out there that was an early, I guess, DIY solution when it comes to this sort of we're not waiting world. But then I'm very lucky to call both of these women friends of mine. But the woman in the blue t-shirt, shirt, and you can't see, but her shirt actually has code on it, the Open APS code on it. Her name's Dana Lewis, and she is the creator of the Open APS platform. And this is Melissa Lee, who uses Loop most of the time. And I had a great chat with them last year when I was fortunate enough to be at the ADA conference to hear about what they were doing. I was really keen to take on this brave new world of diabetes technology where we're using existing and available technologies, but playing around with them a little bit. We're not hacking. I think we need to be really clear that we're not hacking into anything. We're just using different ways for them to communicate with each other to augment insulin delivery. So now my kit looks like the two bottom pink bits down there. So an old Medtronic pink insulin pump and a little pink communication device called a Riley link that I wear snugly tucked down my bra next to my pump. And it is there. I actually gave a talk a couple of weeks ago about Loop and went to find my Riley link and it wasn't there, it was hiding in my bag. And it's also driven from my watch and from a phone as well. David's going to talk all about all the components in a minute. But how did this start? Well, it actually started in New York. So I was in New York at Christmas time, not last year, the year before, and I caught up with somebody who was looping. And I'd never heard of this before. So this is sort of 18 months or so ago. I'd never heard of it before. And we were sitting there, he said, I've got something to show you. And he had organised to meet me in this downtown pub because it was historically significant and he wanted to point some things out to me. He said, I've got to show you something and talk to you about something, but just wait a minute, I need to bolus for my beer. And he got out his iPhone and he was pressing buttons and what are you doing? He said, I'm bolusing for my beer. I said, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he introduced me to Loop. And he said, basically I've got this system and this is what it does and I have not woken up with my blood sugar out of range for the last 3 months that I've been doing it. I said, what do you mean? So I've been waking up with my blood sugar between 80 and 100, 4 and 5 every single morning for 3 months. And I looked at him and I said, this is witchcraft, what are you talking about? How do I make it happen right now? And he explained it to me a little bit, gave me a website and said, go and read up, you can do this. So I went home and I read all the documents and said, I can't do this. This is really technical. I get that everything is there online. I get that I have one of those pumps that I need at home. I use a continuous glucose monitor. I can go and buy the little pink communication device. They're actually not pink. David actually 3D printed me a little pink case so that it would match my pump. I've got all the bits, but I can't build an app. I don't understand what an algorithm is. I don't get this at all. And so I put it all away for a little bit. And then after a little bit of time, I finally took the plunge. It actually wasn't until August of last year. So 2 days ago, I celebrated my Loop anniversary, so a year of Loop. And this is what suddenly my diabetes looked like. I now drive my insulin pump from my phone, and I bolus from my iWatch. And it is a brave new world of diabetes technology, and it sounds quite scary, but let me tell you some of the things that have happened since I started looping. I did not have a baby. But that's my baby. She's 13 now, she's still my baby. I sleep like one. So I didn't realise this. I can sleep like you would not believe. I've always slept incredibly well. But diabetes and sleep, they don't go all that well together sometimes. So, you know, I might be low overnight, I might be high overnight, I need to get up and go to the loo to get a glass of water, to treat a hypo. Or I slept through the whole night and yet I get out of bed and I think, why am I so exhausted? I just had 8 hours sleep. And I would look at my CGM data and see that I'd been low for 3 hours and I hadn't woken up. My husband and I both slept through the implants. Or that I was like this all night and I'd slept through it all, but I felt like I'd run a marathon when I got out of bed, which if anybody knows me is quite stereotypical because I don't do any sport at all, so thought of that not happening. But this is how I felt after I started looping. So this is from one of my blog posts. My new diabetes feels lighter and less encumbered. So this was about burden. This was about reducing the burden of diabetes. Suddenly I had that reduced burden. My attitude towards my diabetes had changed because I wasn't hating it anymore. I was existing alongside of it. I wouldn't say happily, but you know, it was there and it was something that I needed to think about a lot less. It was a real change in there are seats down the front if anybody wants to. I don't fight, I'm very, very friendly. I can't speak for these guys, but I'm very friendly. My whole attitude about my diabetes had completely changed. And back to the sleep piece, I would wake up in the morning and feel like I could move mountains. After 2 weeks of looping, my daughter said to me, what is wrong with you? How much coffee have you had this morning? And I'd say, no, I haven't had one. I had my first cup of coffee when I get to work. I'm fine. Why? She said, why are you so chirpy and happy? And I said, this is how I am. This is how I used to be in the mornings. That was mornings for me now. And it just meant that overall I was feeling so much happier about my diabetes. I'm involved in a project in Europe called HypoResolve, which is looking at solutions around hypoglycemia. And we had a kick-off meeting in May this year, and I was asked to give a talk about hypos. And my experience of hypos, the literal lows of my diabetes is what I called my talk. And when I was putting it together, I realised I had nothing to grab onto in terms of a recent story to share about hypoglycemia. So I went back and looked at my blog to read about some of the experiences of some really nasty hypos I've had. Now when I say nasty hypos, I don't necessarily mean hypos where I needed third-party intervention. I just, you know, they were like, you know, those hypos that won't quit, or those whiteout hypos, or just those hypos where afterwards I would feel really, really exhausted. I don't have hypos anymore. And that was just absolutely remarkable, not having lows anymore. So I never see that low image on my Dexcom app anymore. And I get those weird eyes in my face, when I'm, drinking a juice. I don't do the drink your juice Shelby thing from Still Magnolias. I don't have a fear of hypoglycemia, and this was, and I actually found this post from one of my blogs about, how I felt after one of those really nasty hypos. Since looping, the hypos had gone away. And here's something else. So this is a quote from somebody called Justin Walker, who's quite well known in the diabetes and the DIY We're Not Waiting world. And I heard him speaking at the American Diabetes Association conference earlier this year in June at the Diabetes Mind D Data event. And he said that by wearing open APS, so he uses open APS, I use Loop, but do the same sort of thing. I save myself about an hour a day not doing diabetes. And that just resonated so much because that is true. So before I was looping, the first thing I would do every morning would be reach over, grab my phone, and see what my Dexcom app was telling me. What's my glucose level right now? Now I get up, and I do not think about diabetes. Unless my phone is alarming, I don't think about diabetes until I go to put something in my mouth. And that might not be until I have a coffee, which I always have a very milky coffee, an hour and a half later. It might not be till lunchtime, whatever time it is, then I start thinking about my diabetes. But I can go for hours every morning not thinking about diabetes. If there's nothing alarming, I don't think about it. That is a really huge shift. And when we're talking about that reducing burden piece, this is how that burden got reduced. And I also want you to think about that. An hour a day, that's 7 hours a week. That's a lot of extra time for me to drink coffee or work. So the other thing that's happened is I talk more now about time in range, and I spend time in range a lot more. Now, when I was diagnosed, I was told I knew nothing about diabetes. There was no diabetes in my family. I didn't know anyone with diabetes. You need to keep your blood sugar between 4 and 8. I just nodded my head and went, okay, sure, I can do that, right? It's like driving a car. I just drive at 60 kilometres an hour because I can do that. This speedometer, I just do that. Keeping my blood sugars between 4 and 8 was a near impossibility. I spend anywhere between, usually about 90%, 95% of my time in range these days, with very, very little effort. And my A1C, and I don't really like talking about my A1C as a measure, but I'm standing in front of a room of health professionals and I know that you care about that. I have an A1C that is in the 5s, and I do that without any effort, and I have no hypos. I have no hypos, and I have an A1C that the last time I had an A1C that low, I was pregnant, I was checking my blood sugar 15 times a day. I do it with no effort, with no lows. That is the incredible piece. Okay, so we're going to talk about safety for a minute because I know that you're all thinking safety is really, really important. And safety is the most important thing to me. So this is a quote from, well, let's start with the bottom one from Dana Lewis, who I mentioned earlier. So Dana frequently talks about open APS and DIY systems, and she'll be standing in front of a room, and then often after her there might be somebody from industry talking about their devices, or healthcare professionals talking about regulated and approved devices, and they're always talking about the safety features. This is safe, this has been through regulatory processes, this is safe, 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 safe. And I just want you to think about that for a minute and what you're saying to people who are doing what we're doing. Because when you're talking about skin in the game, and I phrase it like this, skin in the game, no one has more skin in the game than the person who is wearing this literally on our skin. Okay, so I'm trusting this device to automatically dose a potentially lethal drug into me, and I trust it because it is safe. When all of the open APS devices were built, or DIY APS devices were built, or the algorithms, safety is where they started. Safety is where they started. So, how freaked out was my endo? It might be in this room, but anyway. Thankfully, my endo did not say, here's your problem, looks like you're paying too much attention to what's going on. So I went to see my endocrinologist once I'd already started looping. And I'll tell you now, I have an endo who is remarkable. She does not have a judgmental bone in her body. She has always been nothing other than supportive about the way that I choose to manage my diabetes. So I generally wasn't expecting anything other than that support. However, I'm very involved in online groups around these sorts, around DIY systems, and that's not the case for a lot of people. A lot of people actually are terrified, too afraid to tell their healthcare professionals because they're being told, well, I will no longer work with you, I will no longer treat you, I'm sacking you. And I knew that she wasn't going to do that, but I was a bit worried. But I presented my case, not a PowerPoint presentation, but I told her about the sleep. And I told her about how amazing I feel. And she had my A1C data there. And I told her about how I can move mountains in mornings and how diabetes is now just something I deal with like whatever else I have to deal with in my life, instead of it being something that some days I actively hate and some days make me feel like I just really don't want to get out of bed. And her words were, well, how can I do anything other than support you? And that is what I'm urging health professionals to think about when somebody comes to you and says, I'm thinking about doing this or I am doing this. We're not expecting you to recommend it necessarily. We're not expecting you to even understand how it all works. We just want your support, because I don't know anybody who is using this technology who has not walked away, who has not ended up feeling incredibly empowered about their diabetes, so much healthier about living with diabetes, and ready to take on the world, because that's absolutely how I feel. You can read more about this. It's not a shameless plug, it's just because I know that a lot of people don't know all that much about DIY solutions. If you go to diabetogenic.wordpress.com and use the term search, you will read my experiences. You will also get to the links to the official Loop documents. Everything is online. There is nothing that is not available. It's all open source. Nobody is making any money from this. So the creators have said, here is something that worked for me, and I want everybody else who wants to have access to it. This is one way of managing diabetes. This is the best way for me today. Thank you.
Thank you, Renza. And as I said, we will leave question time to the very end. Now, I've got to open up my phone to introduce David because it's in an email. So our next presenter is David Burren. So David initially trained as an electrical engineer, then has worked in many roles in the worlds of information tech, education and photography. David has lived with type 1 diabetes since high school, which was a couple of years ago maybe. His first endo in 1982, oh I gave it away, was Harold Bridle, who recently passed, not because of David. Today he works both as a diabetes technologist and as a professional wildlife photographer, and writes the Bionic Bookie blog. So David, we'll turn it over to you. David is a very technical guru, and for the people standing at the back, there are chairs at the front and a few scattered around if you really do want to sit. So over to you, David.
Sure. Okay. If you want to look up or track down some information about these, you can go and check bionicbookie.com. Just search either my name or my name is Diabetes, and you'll probably find me at Bionic Bookie. Let's see. I'm going to talk about the technology behind all of these systems. I'm going to talk about the the user-built systems, the do-it-yourself systems, but also some of the commercial options too, because they get compared against each other. Now, they cover two areas. Renza mentioned Night Scout. Night Scout was the first CGM in the cloud. XCOM have publicly said that they've added features such as the follow feature because Night Scout brought it to the user base and people wanted it. So they go hand in hand. And then the closed loop pump systems, there's a lot of do-it-yourself stuff and there's a lot of commercial stuff going on, and it can be crossover as well. I'm actually going to talk about Night Scout a little bit because it's a basis for a lot of this stuff. It's a very good example of user-driven innovation in the health sphere. Now, a lot of people hear about this Night Scout thing and they think, oh, someone's saying they're uploading their data to Night Scout. Night Scout is not some company or entity out there. It's a piece of software. someone who sets up a Night Scout site, instead of setting up a WordPress blog, they set up a Night Scout site. It's their own site with their own data in it. They can set whatever password controls on it they want, so it's all perfectly private, all perfectly public if people want. Brenza mentioned it started out from parents wanting to monitor their CGM data. So initially it came from Dexcom receivers, but there are now lots of things that will upload to a Night Scout site. So the CGMs, you can upload from Libra sensors, talk about that later, you can upload pumps. So Night Scout, as well as just your CGM data, can track information about your insulin doses and your carb doses, and all of that information. And you can interact with Night Scout with apps on your watch, on your phone, through a web browser. Extra and Spike for Android and iOS are programs that can act as CGM uploaders to it. I'll demonstrate some of that. Now, hopefully if I can do this. Yay, there we go. There's a Night Scout site. So this is a reasonably simple one. And there's our HBO, there's our scale there, so 4 and 10. This is currently set to a logarithmic scale. I could change that. And there it is over the past day. We can go and we can select. That's one. There we go. We can select if we want to see the last day, just the last 3 hours. There's a gap in the CGM data there. One of the really useful things about Night Scout, you can upload your data here, and then you can give various people their own passwords to access it. So someone's doctor can look at the data, or a parent can follow a child, all sorts of things. But there's also, with all this data in here, lots of reporting that we do. And I find this really useful when talking to my doctor. So in this case, just give it a minute because this is happening live across the internet. I can say for the last 3 days, look at the percentile chart. I can show, calculate, and there's the percentile chart. So these are tools, AGP graph, whatever we want to call them, tools that we're used to. I could look at the last 3 months. That has to think a little bit about going back through all that data, but it won't actually take long. 90 days is not a lot. Yes, this data is mine. So you saw before, actually I can see at the top there that my blood sugar is currently 6.3. That's my percentile graph over the last 3 months. Now this does include a month when I was travelling around Namibia on a photographic expedition, eating all sorts of different food and getting hyper effects from too much sugar and stuff that I didn't expect sugar in, getting gluten because I also have celiac disease and that affects all sorts of other stuff. So not the best 3 months to show people, but it's real world data. As well as the percentile graph, we can look at daily data, we can look at distribution, there we go. We can look here at timing range. So this is saying that over that 3 months I achieved 90% in timing range. Range here is between 3.9 and 10. Those are sort of the classical American 70 to 180. And it's estimating that my HbA1c was 5.8. Last time it was tested, it said 5.7 and the lab test said 5.6. If I go for something more recent, such as the last week, there we go, almost 97% and 5.5. I had a couple of hypos there. I had a couple of hypos last night because I overindulged and ate a whole bag of chips and forgot to actually do anything about it. And you will see that. I come back here over the 24-hour, you can see up there, this was during the night, I had the chips there, I had dinner, I had cider, on my way back to my motel, I got stuck into some chips, it went up, and then the system brought it down again. So I use that data in looking every now and then at my own data so I can see how I've been going over the past week, and when it comes time to talking with my healthcare professionals, I can either take the computer in and show people live, or I can print out some of these graphs and put all the data there. And with the lab test, the HbA1c, that sort of provides some correlation for the doctor. That, yeah, that data is sort of the same as that, so all these CGM traces might actually be trustworthy, and they show that hopefully I'm not having too many hypos. Oh, those 3 months did also include 2 months when I was using a different insulin and I was having some hypo unawareness with that, so there were some hypo events normally there. Like I said, it's not perfect, but it's an example of sort of the real world. Okay. And Nightscout continues to grow and evolve. It was created in 2013, but it's continually modified. There were a couple of people who initially put it together, but the source code is out there. It's an open source project like lots of other things out on the internet. Everyone can go and read the source code. Commercial companies can look at it and think, oh, that's a really good idea. They can't actually use the code, but they can get ideas from it. It's all shared, and people keep developing it. And one thing to keep in mind is open source does not mean insecure. Experience in the IT world with commercial systems shows that open source software is often, because it's reviewed by so many people, more secure than the closed secretive source code. Security is important when it comes to trusting our lives to these systems. There is a big community around this, not just Nightscout, but the whole thing. And do it yourself does not mean do it on your own. There is always someone else there who will share their experiences with other people who have conditions as well. Everyone's very aware of, we can't give medical advice, but I'm perfectly entitled to describe what worked for me. Someone can decide if that works for them. I haven't contravened any laws. I will tell them to make their own decisions, talk to their doctor, but there's nothing stopping us. Okay. But it's unapproved. It is provided as source code. Everyone has to download it and build it themselves. It's not provided as a product. It's supplied as a product that would be subject to any regulation, because this stuff came out of the FDA, which is similar to what we have in the TGA in that regard. Everyone has to build it themselves, and with it there is acknowledgement in there that this is not a medical device, this is experimental software, it's not being provided for medical use. It might be useful for that, but it's not being provided for that. So everyone's very conscious of that. Now, I'll go back to basics. Without the technology, what do we do with managing our diabetes? All of this, we're talking type 1 with insulin. Now, we're sent home with insulin and some training. Training is different in 1982 than it is now, and there's sorts of phases in between. But when we go home, we are the ones who are applying it. In one of our intermittent appointments, our doctors enable our access to insulin with a prescription, and we then get to use that insulin throughout every day of our lives to stay alive. We can make lots of decisions every day. What sort of decisions do we make? Well, think about the food that we're eating. We think about what type of food. We think about all the fats that's going to complicate things. There's my pizza, it's got fat in it, that's going to delay absorption. Maths get quite complicated, but we have to think about all these things. And why is this advancing blood stuff? We think about the exercise. It'll use up carbs, it'll also change our sensitivity. We might need more carbs later, we might need less insulin later. We have to think about how long it's going to take our insulin to start working, when it's going to stop working. We want to avoid stacking insulin. What our current glucose is, and whether we're trending up or down. that's stuff we do all the time, whether we're doing MDI or pump. Some people manage to ignore most of that and live a very simplified world. They don't always come in with the numbers that they want, but I'm not casting any judgments. In most of the treatment regimes that people use, we're doing that all the time. And sometimes we get it wrong. Now, I've got failing quotes because it's not judgmental, but things go wrong sometimes. There is one obvious story that I think most people who've been on MDI can relate to, which is in the evening picking up your short-acting pen and giving yourself your evening dose of lots of insulin. But it's not a complete disaster. We stay up, we eat, we test, we come out of it. And we try not to do it again. So that's without the technology, and I'll come back to those things. So there are 3 major loop systems out there, do-it-yourself systems, and we talk about closing the loop because we're getting the CGM data from our arm, connecting it via a system that's going to make some decisions about all of these things, essentially with all of those inputs that we were dealing with before, and give the instructions to the pump to give us more or less insulin. They are OpenAPS, Loop, and Android. Android APS, I'll talk about each of them in person. These are separately. These are separate products, but there's a lot of overlap between them. Android APS is based on code from OpenAPS, features that come out in that end up in Android APS later. Ideas that come up in one get shared around the place. All these communities overlap. Some people chop and change, use different ones and decide which one they like. So OpenAPS is, it runs on a little computer such as this one, a little pocket Linux computer. Now this little computer, by the way, so this is a case I printed, it's got a battery in it, and inside there's a little computer. That is a little embedded computer made by Intel. It's not a diabetes device, it's just a computer. And the little board on there has enough things that it can talk to a pump by radio. So we put that in our pocket, and from our phone, our CGM data can be sent to this device. It makes all the decisions, and it can talk to the older Medtronic pumps. It used to be that the first ones of these had USB ports, and people would plug in the CareLink USB sticks and work out how to talk to it with those. But then eventually, we worked out that there were other radios that we could use that were a whole lot more efficient. So this one actually has a radio on it. There's a little aerial for it hanging off. Now, Cheryl is currently using OpenAPS. I used it for quite a long time. I've been looping for a bit over a year. It's about the same time as you, so remember cafe meeting and stuff. I'll talk about the next system. Loop, which is what Renzi uses. So this runs on iPhone, so all the decision making is being made in the iPhone. And again, you download the software, you register as a developer with Apple to get the tools, and you build it yourself and you deploy it onto your phone yourself. And it talks to the pump via a little driver link. And I was hoping Renzi was going to hold one up, but you don't need to go delving for it. So,
I've got it today.
Yeah, it's about the size of a matchbox. Yeah. So that takes the Bluetooth signal from the phone, can talk to that, and then that has the radio that can talk to the pump. So that talks to the older Medtronic pumps. Oh, I should go back one step. In OpenAPS, it currently talks to the older Medtronic pumps. There is some experimental work to get it to talk to the newer pumps that have Bluetooth built in them. There is also some work going on with Loop to talk to other pumps. There's work in the US to talk to the Omnipod, but that's not important for us here. And again, some of the Bluetooth pumps. No one knows when that might be done. There's no product timeline, there's no one committed to this stuff. It's all volunteer work, it's people solving the problem for themselves. But they may come. And Android APS, the URL is very similar now to androidaps.org. So it's similar in that it runs on an Android phone. I'm running Android APS at the moment. It's my data. So it is receiving the Bluetooth CGM signal from my Dexcom. And this one is talking to the AccuCheck combo in my pocket. There's no little Riley link, so it's the phone and the pump. It also works with the Dana pumps. Dana R was sold here. We get to find out soon if the Dana RS makes it back to Australia. I do know some people who are so keen on this stuff before the combo was supported that they've gone and bought Dana pumps from overseas because it works and they just want this product. They want to be able to live their lives again. Never mind, they can't get it through the health insurance, they'll just go out and spend enough $1,000. Now, I'll just jump over to Night Scout again. This Night Scout site is showing, there we go. This is the data from my APS. So you can see my CGM graph there. You can see up here that it's changing my basal insulin dosing, and it's also applying lots of really tiny doses. There's lots of 0.4, 0.1 boluses in here, and it's predicting, it's planning where I'm going to go. I'll come back and talk about that, but you can set up your site all sorts of different ways with different features. Some people use Night Scout to track their MDI and where their food gone. It'll track insulin decay. They give them some idea of insulin on board. Come back and talk about that as we go along. Quick thing about pumps. I mentioned some of the pumps there. As Renzo said, no one is hacking pumps. So the pumps that we use are all TGA approved. I think even the Dana RS, if someone imports it, it's got approval. Prosthesis list. And they're not modified. All we're doing is talking to them and giving them the commands to say, put a bit more in, put a bit less in. Occasionally someone pops up with an idea on the internet, oh, I can build one, and everyone says, oh, you fool, don't do that. They get shut down very quickly. The older Medtronic pumps, so these are the Paradigms and the older Bayer pumps. They're old enough, they have no warranty, they're not especially waterproof, but they are popular because they're supported by two of the major products. So there's lots of those being used. In Australia, it's really hard to estimate how many people use it.
We'll ask questions later.
Yeah, take notes.
In Australia, it's really hard everywhere to estimate how many people are actually using this system because people can download this and build it and start using it without talking to anyone else. But there are communities where we have a lot of people interacting, and in the instructions of the download, if everyone follows it through, there's a bit that says, when you've been looping, go and fill in this form, and it's a little survey so we keep an account. Our estimate is there are at least 100 people in Australia using it. It could be twice as many as that, we don't know. We get more every week starting to use it. Now that's pretty small compared to the whole population of pumping people in Australia, compared to the whole population of people using insulin, but it keeps growing, and it was a lot smaller 6 months ago. The pump I'm using is an AccuCheck combo. It's new, it's in warranty, and it's waterproof. Why I chose that one because I like to have warranty when I go to Antarctica or Himalayas looking for snow leopards. They won't necessarily be able to replace it on the spot, but if it gets broken, I've got all my backup plans, and when it comes back, it will get sorted. Now, the other part of it, people sometimes forget when they get really excited about this, I want to set up a loop, and it's, well, have you worked out how to pump? I ain't pumping yet, because you need to know how that stuff works. You need to use a CGM. How much does this stuff cost? Well, you build it yourself, it doesn't cost anything, except there's this thing called CGM that costs a lot of money, so we can't get away from that. We can try and reduce the cost, people stretch out the life of their sensors, there's no funding for them, but it's the same technology. So all these do-it-yourself systems I've seen systems using all of these CGM systems. The Medtronic ones are a little bit more involved to talk to, and they're generally, people after using those for a while, people using the Guardian too, usually because they've got a subscription and they want to use up their sensors, and then everyone into a desktop usually. So the two in Australia, at least, that are mainly used are the Dexcom G5, and there are a lot of people using Libra. So with the Libra, this device is called the Meow Meow or the Night Rider, little device that sits on top of the they're bought from overseas, they're not medical devices. Okay, thank you. Sits on top of the Libra, and your phone basically, your CGM system scans it. So instead of using the Libra reader with its algorithms that's trying to guess and come up with a number of where you are now, it's using the underlying raw data, which is very similar to the data that comes off the other CGM systems. Quick word about online versus offline. In some closed loop things, I've heard people talk about whether the loop is open or closed. In our world, it's normally about whether you're connected to the internet. All of these systems can use Nightscout. They can all upload to Nightscout. Obviously, if there's no internet, if you're in the art gallery and there's no internet for hours, it won't upload anything. If you're out on the ocean, they can all be used without internet. Some of them need a little bit of special configuration to make sure it's going to work smoothly without internet, but they can all work smoothly. And I go places where, trust me, there is no internet. I'm going to fly along. I talked before about it varies the pump's temporary basal rate. It takes all of those inputs I was talking about before. So a lot of these are the standard pump settings. They tend to get copied out of the pump. And then it does all the calculations we were doing before, but it does it every 5 minutes. And it does it the same way every time. It doesn't do it with a hypo brain. It does it the same way every time. And the people who've been doing this stuff, if the code is doing something wrong and needed tweaking, it's very obvious because you notice very quickly the patterns. We see patterns in our own stuff when we're using it. We notice when our insulin sensitivity changes. So the last year I've lost 15 kilograms and I've noticed my insulin sensitivity increase. I wouldn't have noticed that if I was just bolsing for food and then numbers came out and I wasn't really paying attention. But the software actually keeps track of that and shows me what's going on. Is it a magic fix? No. You can't just plug in and turn on and get a solution out. It will take a while to tune everything. Getting your pump settings right before you start really helps because it becomes very obvious with this repetitive thing. If your carb ratio isn't right, you will suddenly notice rather than, oh, maybe I underestimated that food before. You will notice the patterns. Hybrid closed loop, people talk about hybrid. Sometimes it feels like an actual closed loop, completely independent. I've run my system so I don't declare any food. I just eat food and it notices my blood sugar reacting and it guesses how much food is in there, keeps track of that, and I was getting 90% in range and not declaring any carbs. I would just go with it. Not high carb meals, but it just worked. Feels like a closed system, but it's always monitored. We don't trust these to just plug in, can't just plug in, go home and it's all going to be cured. It's not a cure, but it does reduce our burden of watching things. Mostly, I look at my system, look at my watch, there's my data. Oh wow, it's doing the right thing. And occasionally it's, is that right? Oh, I'll go and tweak that, but that's not every minute. It's every now and then. Do need to finish the thing about safety. The big thing, is it safe? As Princess said, it's built from the bottom up, everything is done conservatively. If the loop component dies, the pump temporary basal rate goes away and the pump goes back to your normal basal rate. Everything's normal. The pump has limits on how much you can bolus and what basal rates you can set, and we set those in the pump as a safety thing, so if the software did go wrong and try to do too much, it'll stop it. The software itself has also got multiple levels of, I'm going to check, I'm going to make sure I don't go over. Most of these, if they think you need, say, one unit of insulin in the next half hour, it could set a temporary basal rate, but some of them will say, I'm going to use the old super bolus where we can take our basal and bring it forward into a smaller bolus so it actually gets into the system faster. And it might say, oh, we need 1 unit of insulin but I'm going to apply at most a third of that, and then I'm going to check again in 5 minutes to make sure we're heading into the right direction, because it knows once we put the insulin in, we can't take it out again. And we still get nice curves with all of these smaller doses. System predicts where we're going to be and where we're going to go. You saw the purple lines before. And it does that and checks again every 5 minutes. And if it all goes wrong, we have a CGM, and the CGM has alarms, and we say, oh shit, I need some glucose. Or it's, why am I high? I need to tweak something. And in the worst case, I could eat my way out. Safety, Renzo was claiming before that she's got a lot of skin in the game. We all have a lot of skin in the game. I'm reasonably confident to say I'm one of the most risk-averse people in the room. But sometimes people will look at the things that I do and think, oh my God, you're doing all these weird, scary stuff. That's really risky. It's no, I've considered this stuff very carefully. I'm very invested in this. It's my life being managed. I've looked at the source code. I see how all this works. I used to write software to manage multi-million-dollar systems in real time, whether it's industrial process control systems, communication systems using high-speed train control systems, operating IT infrastructures for telcos. Failure was not an option, and trust me, it's not an option here either. And it's not just me. I haven't necessarily looked at all the source code, but with the hundreds of other people around the world who are also doing this, many of them are more skilled than I am. And I'm reasonably confident that we've found things, and improvements keep getting made over time. Quickly fly over the commercial systems. The 670G is expected here soon. And soon is going to be is an interesting question. Requires Guardian 3. CGM has fixed targets, so it's not as flexible. I can set my target to be 5 now. If I'm going to exercise, I can set my target to be 7.5. I can change all of that. On the Medtronic, you don't have all of that flexibility. Now, this is a little bit bold, but people I know who've been using both the 670G and do-it-yourself systems say they much prefer the do-it-yourself systems because they do not get the control, they do not get the results. Now, I think part of that is probably because the 670G as a product that's first of its kind through the regulatory process has had to go down and dumb things down to the lowest common denominator because the people who are engaged in building their own do-it-yourself systems have got the energy to learn about this stuff. So that's a little bit hard. I've got 2 more slides. Right. CSLM doesn't have something yet. People keep asking about it. It's going to be coming along. Who else is out there? Basically, we don't know yet. And the last thing is, why do we use this? Because we want to live. Do I want to wait years for an inferior product? Because I'm almost 51 now. Every year of my remaining life is not insignificant. And we know that we don't have to wait for the regulatory glaciers, so we're not going to.
Thanks, David, and as I said, there will be questions at the end. So my part of the presentation, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Cheryl Steele, I'm a credentialed diabetes educator, but I also live with type 1 diabetes, so I'm a part of the tribe, and I am a converted do-it-yourself looper with t-shirt. So I'm going to talk you through my version of what I think a health professional needs to know to be able to assist people who have chosen to use this system. So what I want you to get out of today is just have a basic understanding of how the do-it-yourself looping works, to have an increased knowledge about the evidence base behind looping, and understand what reports you can look at as a healthcare professional to assist your patients if they've chosen to go down this path. So, as David's alluded to, there are three main systems out there: the Open APS, which I use, the Loop, which is Renza, and the Android APS, which is David. So we're all different, but we're all the same. So each of them have slightly different requirements, but David's already been through that and I won't repeat it. So how many participants are out there? As of this month, there are at least 807 individuals using some form of do-it-yourself looping that are known to the developers of the Open APS. So that's the American group. There are another 900 known loopers in Europe using the Android APS, and that's grown significantly since Roche opened their protocols. In Australia, we have over 400 members of our Facebook community, but maybe only 50% are actively looping. There's lurkers, there's pre-contemplative, so that all the diabetes educators understand. There's pre-contemplative, there's contemplative, and there's those of us who've moved on. So Dana Lewis, the person who actually developed Open APS, recently presented at a conference in Sydney where she reported there's over 5,900,000 real-world loop hours. So it's not like this is something that isn't happening, and for us as health professionals, we need to understand and move with the times. So basically, there's too many of us to ignore. Currently, do-it-yourself is the only option for people with T1 wanting a closed-loop insulin delivery system. Currently, there is no commercial system available. So you'll find most people who are building their own closed-loop system are very highly motivated to have good control of their diabetes. This isn't the people who don't want to do blood sugars. This isn't the person who goes, well, I won't count carbs. This isn't the patient that says, I'll have Lantus every third day because I know that keeps me out of DKA. These are highly motivated people who want to have good control, who are constantly looking at their data, who are very invested in their own health. So we as healthcare professionals need to be aware and understand the concepts and remain current. This is person-centred care. You know, we all say that's what we're into, person-centred care. Right time, right place, right person, right care. This is your chance to actually engage in person-centred care. So where is the research? All the researchers in the room will want to know. So Open APS users can donate data anonymously to the researchers. Currently, there's a retrospective outcome study being undertaken by Johns Hopkins University in the US, and there's also a predictive algorithm comparison study being done with Stanford University. So for those of you who think we're all rebels out there looking up Wikipedia, no, we're not. There are real-world researchers, real-world people who are very interested in what we're doing. There are other studies currently in progress by the developers, and the community is always open to proposals from researchers to explore aspects of do-it-yourself looping. So the reported benefits of looping: Open APS users report fewer highs and lows, and less severe lows at that, more time in range, a reduction in hemoglobin A1C, and improved quality of life, mostly with better quality sleep. So in 2016, Dana and her group presented at the ADA. There they had 18 of the first 40 adopters, and they responded to a survey. 67% of them were male, 61% of them were adults. Their duration of diabetes was 15 years plus or minus 11.7 years. They had around 10 years of pump experience and around 3 years of CGM experience. And when they looked at the data, now it was done in American, so I've tried to convert it to our language. So time in range pre the system was 5.8%. After using the system, it was 81%. So the time in range improved significantly This was back 2 years ago, and the algorithms have improved since then. If you look at hemoglobin A1C in this study, pre-pumping, it was 7.1%, so often what we consider pretty reasonable control for a type 1. But post, it was 6.2%. And most people using this system would have an A1C in the low 6s to high 5s. And the other reported outcome, 17 of the 18 participants reported better quality sleep, and 56% of those reported a large improvement in their quality of sleep. And as Renza said, that's because you're not waking up low, looking for something to eat, which is usually half the fridge, in the middle of the night. You're not waking up high, needing to do corrections, needing to go to the toilet, needing to have a glass of water. You're actually sleeping all night. And I have to say, as an adopter, that's one of the biggest benefits I've noticed. I go to bed with a normal blood sugar, I wake up with a normal blood sugar, and I sleep like a log all night. So in 2018, just this year again at the ADA, there was another poster presentation put together by the Open Apps community. So this study was performed with the Johns Hopkins University. There were 20 participants. The data was collected 4 to 6 weeks pre and post looping. The participants were already what we would consider very well controlled prior to commencing looping. I couldn't get any of the demographics of the actual participants off the poster, but from here you can see the A1C prior to looping was 6.4, so they were already very well controlled. But post looping, they still got an improvement of 6.1%, but the time in range, which is what we're all talking about these days, improved from 76% to 83%. So a lot more time in range. So for the people living with diabetes, that makes a huge difference. And I think one of the bigger benefits was the overnight BGL percentages. So pre-looping, if you look at the BGLs less than 3.9, 6.4% pre-looping, 4.2% post-looping. So a significant reduction in the amount of time spent with a low blood sugar, and the really low blood sugars below 2.7 almost became non-existent. And again, BGLs, high BGLs during the night, pre-looping 1.7%, post-looping only 0.35%. So there are really, really major improvements. So there is some research behind what happens. It's not just us making it all up, telling you that we feel better. So from that study, they concluded that even those with excellent glycemic control prior to looping can still benefit from using the system, and the reduction of overnight excursions was the biggest change in outcomes. So I think, hopefully, we're proving our case. So now reports and looping, David has mentioned some of these, but I'll go through them a little bit more. Night Scout provides the most useful reports for us as health professionals when you want to look at looping outcomes. The hashtag We're Not Waiting first developed Night Scout to allow parents to follow their children's CGM, but since then it has evolved to becoming much more useful. So the types of reports you can see are from 1 day up to 3 months worth of data. So depending on what you're looking at and what you think is going to be useful, because in this consultation, when I see David, when he comes through his diabetes education, we mostly just play around with his reports and have a look, and I'll ask him what's new, and he teaches me more than I would ever teach him, which is wonderful to be a health professional involved with patients who are so invested in their own outcomes. So you need the client's address for their Night Scout account, or they can actually give you password access. And you can look at things like day-to-day, daily stats, distribution, which I think David shared with you, the hourly stats, percentile chart, weekly success, calibrations, treatments and profiles. So you can actually, if you're worried that the CGM isn't accurate, you can actually look and see a graph of the calibrations where the person is actually doing blood glucose treatments and seeing if the CGM is actually accurate. So just to share, this is an example of a percentile chart. Now, you can individually set your targets in Night Scout. This one, the lower limit is set at 3.8 and the upper limit at 7.5. And I defy anybody using a current system to have an APG graph that looks like that. It is really amazing. This isn't mine, by the way, I wish it was. A bit more bumpy, but this is one of the people that I see. And, you know, he actually achieved this using a Libre and a Meow Meow Bluetooth adapter and just hanging in there, pumping away. This is another example. This is a distribution graph. So this one is mine, so it's not quite as perfect, but you can look at the amount of time spent in range, any excursions that are high or low, and it does give you an estimated A1C based on what it's seeing. So you can share this with patients and have a look at the standard deviation, how much it's differing. You can have a meaningful discussion about why do you think that. Like I could say to you, well, there was one tiny little slither of hypo there, and that was my fault because I under or overestimated the amount of carbs in a meal. And my pump can zero me out using the algorithm, but it can't suck the insulin out again. So if I make too big a mistake, it's not going to save me from being me, and I'm just a normal human being. The larger ones, dare I confess, we had a student diabetes educator that came and spent some time with us. When she was leaving, she gave us this ginormous box of lollies. Most of our students give us chocolates. I hate chocolate, so it can sit there till it goes mouldy. I'd never eat it. But lollies, I'm thinking, oh, I'll just have a couple. I'll give a little bolus for it. So consequently, there'd always be this little spike in the afternoon. So I'm human too, and I didn't wait till I was hypo to eat the lollies like my mum taught me when you got them at the birthday parties. This also is very useful. This is a daily treatment one where you can look at, and down the bottom you can see where the basal rates are changing, but you can also see where there's boluses, where there's calibrations done. So you can share this with your patients to see how many carbs they're eating, what sort of dosing they're getting, and all of these reports actually come out of Night Scout. You can either ask your patient to share the address with you and look at them, or they might print them out and bring them as a printout, or export them and email them to you. So they're all readily available to give you a discussion point for your consultation. So, what can go wrong? The CGM sensor can fail, so you get inaccurate or no readings, and I did that once, I have to admit. My sensor was looking a bit dodgy before I went to bed. I did a calibration, I thought, oh, it's a bit off, but it'll be right, I'll wait till morning. Lesson learned, because it kept reading lows, the pump would keep turning down, thinking I was going hypo, and I woke up for the first morning, and I don't know how long, with a blood sugar of 10 and thought I was going to die. Like, oh my God. So lesson learned now, as soon as the sensor starts to look dodgy, you change it, you don't try and eke out. A pump malfunction, of course, because a lot of us are using the old VO pumps that are out of warranty, so you could potentially get a button or a motor error, so you have to be aware of that. You can have, just like anybody pumping, an infusion set failure, so a bent cannula or a dislodged cannula, and you need to be aware of that. You can get a communication failure where the looping ceases when the CGM and pump are not communicating via the looping device, whether it's your rig or your Riley link or whatever. It's a bit like when you have a shower, you leave your pump at home and get to work and your CGM starts screaming because no insulin going in, and all of a sudden you go, where's my pump? So you can lose communication. And of course there's human error, because we are all human beings. We all live with type 1 diabetes, and we can miscalculate the number of carbs, too much exercise without adjusting targets. So one of the beautiful things about this system, if you are going to exercise, heavens forbid, you can actually adjust your targets so that you're less likely to have hypos in relation to your exercise. So if the pump stops looping, well, the CGM is usually still functioning with alarms. So it will yell at you if you start going high or start going low. The pump's still functioning according to the basal and bolus settings that you've put in there. So it's important that the pump settings are accurate prior to commencing looping to ensure that the VGL remains stable if the rig loses communication. So whenever somebody comes to me with a referral to say they're thinking about looping, that I will spend some time with them working on their pump settings to make sure that they're pretty good before we take the next step toward looping. So very important, and that they know how to troubleshoot if something does go wrong. So I've had some patients referred who've still been using NDI. So I would start them on a pump first, make sure they're proficient with pump use, they know how to troubleshoot before you take that next step to actually building a loop and going down that track. So how much does it cost? Pumps, well, most people in Australia are using the old Medtronic pumps. If you're like me, you get it out of the drawer, because Medtronic usually every 4 years are telling you need to upgrade. So your old one gets put in the drawer. So you drag it out and you put the battery in and you hope that it's got the right software version. But you can also purchase new pumps now, like David's got the new Roche Combo, which is in warranty, and the Dana RS, which is sort of not available in Australia, but sort of is if you bring it in from somewhere else. There's the CGM. Most people that I see are using Dexcom G5. A box of sensors will cost you $370. There's 4 sensors in a box, and the transmitters are $540 each. Most people will get a sensor, even though it's only approved for 7 days use, will get 2 to 3 weeks out of every sensor. So that helps spread the cost a little bit. I know some people who get far more than that time. For me, the average is about 3 weeks. And then for the Libre, the sensors, of course, are $92.50 each. And then the Bluetooth adapter is about $100 to buy to convert it to a CGM so you can use it for looping. So what's the best advice to give a patient considering looping? Get experience with a pump first. You really need to understand how a pump works. Get some experience with CGM to understand what the data means and how to interpret it. Ensure that the pump settings are optimised before you start looping. Read the docs to decide which system suits the individual needs. So here's 3 of us all up here, all using different systems, and we've all made a decision based on our needs, what we want to do. And you need to acquire the necessary equipment. So Renza had to go out and buy a Riley Link. I had to get an Edison board and an Intel processor. David had to get his bits and pieces. So mine, to import my pieces from America, cost me about $200. I'm not sure, what does a Riley Link cost, Renza? About $100? Yeah, so there is a little bit of cost of getting those. Now, to set it up, myself or no other health professional is going to do it for you. You actually have to do the programming yourself. Having said that, there's amazing support through our community. In Melbourne, we've had 2 build parties now, where we actually have a room at a university with lots of Wi-Fi connection. You come along with your own computer, with your pump, with your bits and pieces that you've bought, and you program your setup. And there are people there to help you through it. So you're not out there alone. There are people, but you do need to do it yourself. And I think that, to me, is one of the biggest safety things. If you can't work out and troubleshoot how to set it up, it's probably not the right system for you. You've got to be highly motivated to want to do this. And I would recommend to anybody considering looping, maybe set up Nightscout first to monitor pumping before you take the next step. So do it gradually, step by step. So further advice would be join the Facebook groups. In Australia, Aussie, 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 loop, loop, loop. What else would you expect? The international one is Looped. The Open APS also have one in the UK. I'm not sure of the address. Put it upside down, so I won't read it. I'm just about finished. Facebook pages provide a helpline that would be the envy of any commercial pump supplier. You can go online at any time of the day or night, and because it's international, there'll be somewhere in the world somebody that will answer your question. The developers are the most amazingly generous people I know. This is all free, doesn't cost you anything except a thank you maybe, and they will support you through anything that you need. And there's even at the moment as we speak, translations going into 4 other languages to help people around the world set up these systems. So I feel very proud and honoured to be a part of this tribe. I think the Type 1 community are a wonderful group, and we are invested in our own health. David's worried about his remaining years at 51, so I'm going to tell you all I am. So that's the end, because Renza tells me I've got to get off now. So, stop. So what I've got to press?
Just right arrow again.
Right arrow again. There we go. No?
Right arrow, not left.
Geographically challenged. So now, without further ado, will I introduce you, Renza, to introduce Greg? Would you like me to introduce Greg? So, with great pleasure, I would like to introduce Greg Johnson, who is the CEO of Diabetes Australia, who is going to launch the official Diabetes Australia position statement on do-it-yourself looping systems. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you. Thanks, Cheryl. Now, you'll be able to get copies of this as you leave, but no one should leave right now, because I think there's going to be lots of Q&A, interesting Q&A to follow. So I just wanted to say a few words before I say something about this, and that is, you know, it's 2018, we're 18 years into the 21st century, which we all know is the information age, and everything's about data and big data and connectivity. And yet, despite that, we live in a very clumsy and bumbling world in diabetes, often where really simple things don't happen, and simple devices don't talk to each other, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, if you step away from this for a moment and look at other fields of health, then we've seen major advances in these things. So I recently had the personal example where I needed some medical imaging tests for something, and my prostate. So I'm of that age. So there I need an ultrasound, I need an MRI, I need to see a urologist, my GP is concerned. So in one day I managed to go and have an ultrasound on one machine, I think the machine was made by General Electric. I then had an MRI on a machine made by Siemens. Both of those machines were able to talk to a picture and archival service made by another vendor that gathered the digital images of my MRI and ultrasound and the reports. They then communicated to my urologist, who I saw a few hours later, who had all the images on his system in his office and was able to show me, and we talked about my scans. And I spoke to the GP an hour later, who also had them, and they were miles apart. So, you know, why does that happen? That happens because in the medical imaging world many years ago, it was realised you had to create an interconnected standard. It's called DICOM, digital connection system, a standard that means that manufacturers and developers of lots of different products and software and devices can make them with a common international standard that means they talk to each other. Right. This happened a long time ago in other fields of health, and it works very effectively. And yet in diabetes, we don't have anything like that. So we have enormous frustration, which I fully understand, and I think we all would, that it just doesn't make sense that I can be wearing a pump here and a diabetes monitoring device, glucose monitoring device, whatever it is, and they simply don't talk to each other, and it shouldn't be like that. So, in part, and secondly, then what does that lead to? It leads to frustration, it leads to people wanting to change the world and things to move faster, and it leads to lack of innovation. So we don't, so it's very frustrating. And then we get all of this, talk and, finger pointing and name calling about people being hackers or loopers or some other term that might be derogatory, which is all unhelpful. So our fundamental view is we need to be open about this. We need to make sure that we talk about the issues of interconnectivity and data and how information is sensibly shared across devices. All that can be done in a way that's confidential and controlled by the right people, by the person with diabetes, and by their chosen health professionals, whoever they want to share it with. None of it needs to be inappropriate. None of it needs to be something that leads to us blaming or vilifying people for doing something that is ultimately caused by silliness and frustration that we live in a silly world that doesn't let devices don't talk. They can, they should. So one of the things we're calling for in this position statement is that we do move, and obviously this needs to happen with regulators, but it's happened in many other areas, as I said, that we have an interconnectivity standard that enables devices to talk to each other, that enables information to be shared, that enables these things to develop more rapidly for the benefit of people with diabetes. So we should be talking about this, we shouldn't be scared about it, we shouldn't be blaming people for being involved in it. These people are not bad people, as you can see. But many people have many concerns. So, you know, we fundamentally, our position statement is called people with type 1 diabetes and do-it-yourself technology solutions, and hopefully this is a useful position statement in us all having an open discussion, having better understanding about the issues, but in particular, moving towards solving some of the, the structural problems we have, which are all possible if we all understand the problems and call for them and people act on them. So, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. I'd now like to open up the panel for discussion. We'll get Greg to stay up here in case you also want to ask him some questions. So,